Ladies and gents, welcome back. The ArriveCAN app's future may be in question at the moment, but is the government ramping up quarantine efforts for something that may be happening this fall? Who knows? We'll see. Well, let's have a look in the news. Transport Minister says future of ArriveCAN app under discussion. What? We all know how unpopular this ArriveCAN app is. Though he deftly tried to avoid getting nailed down on the future of the ArriveCAN app, Federal Transport Minister Omar Alghabra admitted during a Windsor visit that Ottawa is sensitive to the concerns of border communities and businesses advocating for its demise. The current border measures are up for review in September, but Alghabra told reporters today in Windsor that the government doesn't necessarily have to wait until then to make changes. This comes from the Windsor Star, by the way, a border town that I actually grew up in. I've spoken to many border communities, including here in Windsor, who are sharing the feedback they're hearing from the community, from local stakeholders, Alghabra said. We're listening. He went on to give a bunch of platitudes. But here we are. I'm not going to preempt what will happen. In particular, the tourism industry has been highly critical, pointing to data that shows the number of Americans visiting Canada is nowhere near pre-COVID-19 numbers. Some local businesses, such as Caesars Windsor, report about a third of their clientele is normally American. So this is detrimental to their business model, something that is normally pretty smooth, free flow of traffic and business going from country to country. We share a giant land border with each other. I'm not going to preempt what will happen just yet, said Alghabra, hinting at that changes could be looming. The discussion is not guided by timelines. It's guided by the information we have, and the sentiment we want to improve efficiency in the traveler's experience. Now, they've always said they go by the science, but when the science doesn't agree with them, they go by different science. And well, here we are, True North reporting. Business Group CEO says ArriveCAN puts cross-border integration at risk. And this is the smooth flow back and forth that I was talking about just a moment ago. Canadian American Business Council, CABC, CEO Mary Scott Greenwood wants the Trudeau government to end ArriveCAN app, reopen Nexus offices, saying the seamless integration of the two countries is at risk. And here's a clip of her saying that.
So I was going to ask you if you've heard anything about why they haven't reopened. I mean, you know, the American ones were closed as well during much of the pandemic, but I know here the office in Detroit, which is where Canadians can go from here, they cross the bridge and go over to the Detroit office to get their interview. But it reopened. I think it was in April that it reopened, so it's been open for quite some time.
Well, that's right. The U.S. Nexus offices are open. Now, remember, when you interview for Nexus, you've got to talk to U.S. as well as Canadian officials. So when you go in for that interview, you're talking to law enforcement from both countries. It doesn't make a lot of sense that Canadians would have to go to the U.S. to talk to Canadian officials to get those interviews. But because the Canadian centers are closed, that's what's happening. And if you're lucky enough to live in Windsor, you're close. You can, as you say, go just right across from to Detroit. But if you live someplace where it's less convenient, harder to get across the border, that becomes a real barrier. And, you know, we've got to get to the place where Canadians and Americans are traveling back and forth, seeing family, having fun, but also doing business together. That's really been a huge hallmark of our relationship, the seamless integration of our economies and of our people, and that's at risk right now.
Absolutely, and this is what Canadians and Americans alike are trying to work towards. It looks like the Canadian government, the federal government on our side, is trying to inhibit the smooth transfer back to the way it used to be. And, well, most of us know, and the rest of the world realizes, that this pandemic is way past the time where any emergency measures should be in place. But the Canadian government has a different opinion, and this from the counter signal. PHAC, the Public Health Agency of Canada, has a new listing open for security guards for its quarantine facilities in Toronto, York, and in Halton, Ontario. FAC is hiring security for quarantine facilities. What the FAC indeed. The post requires risk management and security services for designated quarantine facilities in Ontario. Job posting was published last week and will close on September 9th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Now, this is interesting. We seem to be on the outside. We should be closing these facilities. Why are we making new quarantine facilities and hiring new staff for them? During the COVID-19 pandemic, the Government of Canada created designated quarantine facilities for Canadians unable to quarantine at home after international travel due to proximity with their family members in the home. The public became aware of these facilities following reports of Canadians taken from the airport in unmarked vehicles and forcibly placed in a government facility. For all those out there that are like, this is normal, why would you be upset about what the government's doing? This reads like a Tom Clancy novel. What are we talking about here? In most cases, the facility was a modified hotel. Travelers were typically required to stay in the room for 3 nights or until they received a negative COVID test. I heard stories of people not even being able to notify their spouses that they were put into these quarantine facilities. Quarantine facilities were manned by hotel staff and security guards. According to the Government of Canada website, travelers arriving in Canada who do not have suitable place for quarantine or isolate may be referred to a designated quarantine facility upon the direction of a quarantine officer from the Public Health Agency of Canada. And mind you, you can just say, I don't consent to that. And this is what a lot of people have been doing at the border when it comes to the Public Health Agency, PHAC, or FAC, as I like to call it. During a stay, travelers are required to remain in their room until you receive permission and specific time to leave from a quarantine officer at the facility. Now, here's the post, and it was posted by the Canadian Independent on Twitter. Public Health Agency of Canada has recently listed security job openings for quarantine facilities in York, Toronto, and Halton, Ontario. And this is absolutely recent. This is the 24th of August, date closing September 12th. And this is from Public Health Agency of Canada for Ontario. And the description, it's a Canadian Free Trade Agreement. Here we are. Risk management and security services designated quarantine facilities in Ontario. And this is what they're going for. Now, horror stories frequently emerge from those who were staying at these facilities. Those enforced quarantines were given little to eat and were not allowed to order food. Complaints arose around the facilities didn't comply with specific dietary concerns. In Quebec, one woman was allegedly sexually assaulted during her stay at a facility. Later, in the pandemic, the government required anyone entering Canada by air travel to quarantine at designated quarantine facilities, costing travelers around $300 per night. Canadians who crossed the border by land were largely exempt from this policy. Job posting comes as most Canadians have received 2 doses of the Health Canada approved COVID-19 vaccine. Federal and provincial governments have dangled COVID-19 vaccination status as a means to return to normal. So where does that get us? That return to normal? Well, we all called it. We all knew this was coming. Yep. Feds from the Epoch Times here, feds to implement national booster vaccine campaign next week. This is a post from this morning. Now, we heard Duclos just a few months ago, before the summer. They came out and redefined what it is to be fully vaccinated. Fully vaccinated is no longer a term that they're going to use at the federal government. They now use the term Up to date. That's right. Up to date, ladies and gentlemen. And that means that you will have to have had a booster within the last 9 months to be legally up to date on your vaccine. The federal government will implement a national campaign next week to encouraging Canadians to receive booster doses of the COVID-19 vaccine, says Health Minister Jean-Yves Duclos. It is like a phone battery. You recharge your phone battery by plugging into electricity. You recharge your vaccination by plugging into the government, I guess. Sorry. You recharge your vaccination by protecting by taking action and getting a booster. I'm sorry. It read like that immediately when I was reading. This is the words of Duclos. He said this at an initiative. Said this of the initiative dubbed Protection Wanes. Action is required. There. This is the new one. Action is required. Required. Very interesting language that they're using here, especially since mandates were only suspended. They were only suspended. Anyway, I'm going to leave a link in the description down below for all of these articles that I was reading through. Yeah, what do you think? What do you think? Leave a comment in the comment section down below based on what you're seeing here. There's one more tweet that I wanted to put out here, and this is from Rowan. The science versus the science. Ontario, no mandatory isolation if you're COVID positive. So you don't have to, if you're COVID positive, you do not have to isolate. But Trudeau feds, quarantine for 14 days, even if healthy, vaccinated, but refuse the ArriveCAN app. Unlawful detention, you decide. You decide. So if you refuse to have a tracking device installed on your phone, you will get a quarantine. Is this really about a bug? Is this really about a bug? Anyway, I'll leave it to you guys in the comment section down below. Leave a comment. If you're not subscribed to the channel yet, please do that. Hit the notification bell. It lets you know when I go live impromptu. I normally go live every Friday at 6:30 Pacific time. Hey, what do you know? It's Friday. Join me tonight at 6:30 Pacific time. Check your local listings. Hit that like button, and we'll see you in the next one. Keep on trucking.